Have you ever been scrolling through Facebook when a random memory pops up from years ago, those old photos that bring a flood of emotions? You're just trying to relive a moment, maybe a funny memory or a time when everything seemed simpler. But what if one of those memories came with a twist so shocking, so unexplainable, that it completely turned your world upside down? Imagine being tagged in a picture, one you don't even remember being taken, of someone you know you buried years ago. A family member, a loved one, someone who was gone but now staring back at you from your screen, smiling like nothing ever happened. What do you do in that moment? How do you process the impossible? What do you believe? Is it just a glitch, or something far more sinister at play? In today's video, we're diving deep into a true story that will challenge everything you think you know about the digital world and the mysteries that it can hold. I want you to stick with me, because by the end of this video, you'll have an answer that will make you look at social media in an entirely different way. We're about to uncover a story about a family, a random Facebook memory, and an eerie photograph of someone they buried, or thought they buried. But be warned, what you're about to hear will leave you questioning not just the supernatural, but also the very nature of the technology we use every day. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine it's a normal day. You're scrolling through your Facebook, like you do. You know, just looking at old pictures, checking in with friends, maybe liking a post or two. Then, suddenly, your notifications ping. It's a Facebook memory, one that you've never seen before. The app is reminding you of something from the past, an event, a time when you thought you were surrounded by the people you loved most. But this memory, this photo, stops you cold in your tracks. You stare at it, and your heart skips a beat because the face staring back at you is someone you thought was gone. Someone you buried. This is what happened to a family just like yours. One that, on the surface, lived what seemed like a normal, happy life. But this simple, innocent notification from Facebook, just like the one you get every day, shattered everything they thought they knew. You see, this family had lost someone dear to them years ago. Their grieving process had been long, painful, and final. But there, in that photo, they saw a person they thought they had said goodbye to. And it wasn't just a passing resemblance or some coincidental image of a friend in the background. No, this was the person. Standing there. Smiling. Alive. It didn't make sense. How could a memory from the past suddenly bring someone back to life, or at least, make it seem that way? Was this some cruel trick of the mind? Or was it something more? A glitch? Or something else entirely? Now, I know what you're probably thinking. It's just a mistake, right? A simple glitch in the algorithm, nothing more. But as you stay with me, I'll share more details that will make you reconsider that idea. Something about this story isn't just strange, it's unsettling. And I'm going to take you through every twist and turn of this mystery until we uncover the truth together. I want you to imagine this for a second. You look at the photo, and the person in it looks exactly the same as the one you buried, down to the tiniest detail. Same smile. Same clothes. Same eyes. It's as if the moment the photo was taken had frozen time and brought that person right back into your life. But here's where it gets even stranger. There's something off about the background of the photo. A detail that shouldn't be there. Something that makes the whole thing even more unnerving. I'm not going to give you all the details just yet, but trust me, it's not what you expect. Now, I know you're wondering what's really going on here. How could Facebook, an app you've trusted for years, allow something like this to happen? And who are the real people behind this story? The family? The ones who were so shaken by this event? Well, I'm going to introduce you to them, but I'll also warn you, this isn't just about a glitch in the system. This is something far more profound than that. But I need you to stay with me, because we're only scratching the surface right now. You're about to hear things that will make you look at the digital world around you in a completely new light. You see, as we dig deeper into this mystery, the answers only become more complicated and more bizarre. Was the person in the picture truly alive, or was it an illusion? Is Facebook's algorithm just faulty, or is there something more sinister at play, hidden within the technology we use every day? And what about the family? How did they cope with this bizarre event? How did they come to terms with the possibility that the person they had mourned for years might not be as gone as they thought? But here's the kicker, this isn't just a one-off glitch. What happens next in this story is something that will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about memory, grief, and technology. This isn't just a weird incident that can be brushed off with a simple explanation. No, this is something far darker, something that might just make you rethink your next scroll through Facebook. Are you ready to find out what happens next? Hold on, because in the next few minutes, we'll dive even deeper into this mystery. There's more to this story than meets the eye, and I promise, by the time we get to the end, you'll have the answer that will haunt you long after this video is over. What happened to this family? What is going on with the photo? And most importantly, who is the person in the image that they thought they buried? Keep watching, because the truth is far stranger than you could ever imagine. And trust me, the answer is something you won't see coming. The family at the center of this story, the Owens, were like any other. They lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, tucked away in a community where everyone knew each other's names, and life seemed to flow in the usual rhythm of school runs, weekend barbecues, and holiday gatherings. There was nothing particularly unusual about them until this strange, unexplainable event occurred. The Owens family had always been close-knit, bound together by shared memories, inside jokes, and their deep love for one another. But like many families, they had also known their share of grief. 4 years ago, they'd lost their beloved grandmother, Margaret Owens. Margaret had been a constant in their lives, a woman who had been there for every birthday, every graduation, and every holiday. Her passing was the kind of loss that cuts deep, the kind that leaves an emptiness that's impossible to fill. It was as if she had somehow been transported back in time, back to the moment before she died. The photo wasn't some blurry image or an accidental shot, it was clear, detailed, and incredibly vivid. Margaret was right there, looking as she had in life, sitting at the table and smiling just as she had during those holidays they'd shared. The family had always joked that her spirit would always be with them, but seeing her smiling in that photo, alive again, felt almost too much to bear. The reaction from the Owens family was immediate: shock, disbelief, and then, questions. It didn't make sense. How could this happen? Could it be some sort of trick? Some photo editing that no one had noticed before? But no, this wasn't the work of Photoshop. The photo was raw, real. The timestamp on it matched the year. Everything about it screamed reality. But reality had betrayed them. The first instinct was to think it was a mistake. Maybe it was a glitch in Facebook's algorithm, right? But as they dug deeper, more oddities began to surface. The picture had been uploaded by their cousin, Rachel. Rachel had been the one who had tagged them in the memory, but she had been acting a little strange lately. It wasn't anything major, just subtle things like how she never seemed to be around when family events happened or how she had recently pulled away from the family dynamic. No one really paid it any mind at first. People change, especially after a loss, and Rachel's behavior was written off as part of her own grieving process. But now, it all seemed to be a bit too coincidental. Had Rachel somehow been involved in this strange occurrence? Was she behind the upload? Or could there be another explanation? Suspicion started to creep in, not just because of Rachel, but because of something else that had come to light. A few weeks before the photo had appeared, Margaret's old house, which had been passed down to Rachel after her passing, had gone through some unexpected renovations. Rachel had hired a local contractor to freshen up the place, but she hadn't said much about it. It was one of those decisions that seemed perfectly normal at the time. But now, in light of the photograph, people started to wonder, had Rachel uncovered something hidden within the house? Had she found something that connected her to Margaret in a way no one could have imagined? Perhaps there was a deeper reason why she had become so distant. And then, as if the situation couldn't get any stranger, another family member came into the picture, David Owens, the family's patriarch. David had been the one most affected by Margaret's death. His bond with her had been unbreakable, and the pain of losing her had weighed heavily on him. But just a few weeks before the Facebook memory appeared, David had started visiting a psychic. It wasn't something he'd openly shared with the family, but word got around, and a few of his friends had mentioned his late-night meetings with the so-called medium. Was David seeking closure in some way, trying to reach Margaret from the other side? Had the psychic offered him some sort of answer that led to the appearance of the memory, Or was it just another red herring in a story that was quickly getting more complicated than anyone could have imagined? As all of this unfolded, the Owens family was left reeling. The more they tried to explain away the unexplainable, the more questions piled up. Was it Rachel and her recent strange behavior? Was it David's pursuit of answers from the afterlife? Or was there something even more sinister at play, something that none of them could have prepared for? Every new twist seemed to only deepen the mystery. With each passing day, the family grew more divided, their minds consumed with the possibilities. Could it be that Margaret was trying to communicate from beyond the grave? Could this photograph be some sort of sign, a message from the other side? Or was the truth something darker? Was someone in the family manipulating them, playing on their grief and their fears? Was there a hidden motive behind all of this, a motive that would tear the family apart? As you continue with this story, you'll see the mystery grow even more twisted, more unsettling. Just when you think you have it all figured out, another layer gets peeled back, revealing more secrets, more questions. And I know you're wondering, what really happened to Margaret Owens? How did she appear in that photo, and why now? What could possibly explain the unexplainable? Stick with me, because I promise you, this story has a shocking conclusion that you'll never forget. And when the truth is finally revealed, you'll have to ask yourself, what if the answers we seek are closer than we think, hidden right under our noses, in the most unlikely places? Keep watching, because this mystery is far from over. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. As the Owens family plunged deeper into the mystery, the cracks started to show, and everything began to unravel in ways they hadn't anticipated. The more they tried to piece together the strange photo, the more obstacles seemed to pop up, each one more confounding than the last. Rachel, the one family member whose actions had seemed the most suspicious, was not cooperating. She had become increasingly defensive whenever anyone brought up the photo. At first, she claimed she had simply tagged the memory by accident, that it was a mistake made in the rush of everyday life. But as they pressed her, her excuses began to sound less and less believable. And then, just as they were about to confront her directly, something strange happened. Rachel's phone went missing. Completely vanished. It wasn't just misplaced or forgotten, it had disappeared from the house without a trace. The family searched high and low, but there was no sign of it. The phone was key to uncovering the truth. If they could access her social media, they could trace the exact timeline of events. Without it, they were left with nothing but suspicions and a growing sense of unease. It wasn't just an inconvenience, it felt like someone, or something, was intentionally blocking them from finding out what happened. But that wasn't the only thing that went wrong. David Owens, the patriarch of the family, had been the most dedicated in trying to get to the bottom of the mystery. He spent hours poring over the family's old photos, trying to find anything that could explain the appearance of Margaret in the memory. He was even considering hiring a private investigator when, out of nowhere, his laptop went missing. One evening, after returning home from a particularly stressful day, he discovered it was gone. No one in the family had seen it, and there were no signs of forced entry into the house. His personal documents, the ones he had been using to track down any leads, were nowhere to be found. It felt as though someone was trying to keep them in the dark. It wasn't just a matter of lost items anymore, it was starting to feel like a deliberate attempt to sabotage their investigation. To make matters worse, a cryptic message arrived one evening, sent through an anonymous email address. The message was simple, but it made the hairs on the back of David's neck stand up. Stop digging. You're better off not knowing the truth. No return address, no name, just that chilling sentence. It was clear that someone was watching them, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Whoever had sent it knew about Margaret's death, knew that he, too, had been involved in trying to uncover the truth. What had started as a distant curiosity about the family mystery had suddenly become much more real, and much more dangerous. But it wasn't just the message that disturbed him, it was the source of it. When he tried to trace the phone number, it came back to a burner phone, one that had been registered under a fake name, and one that had been used to send multiple threatening messages in the past. The number had been linked to an unknown individual with no traceable background, someone who seemed to be connected to all the chaos surrounding Margaret's death. But how? And why? What did they want from the Owens family? And what would happen if they didn't stop looking? Meanwhile, in the midst of all this, another unsettling development unfolded. Thomas had recently been digging into the history of the Owens family in an attempt to find something that could explain the strange events surrounding Margaret's photo. He had found a seemingly unrelated piece of information, a photograph taken years ago at another family gathering, one that was buried deep in the family archives. The photo wasn't remarkable on its own, but something about it caught his eye. In the background of the picture, there was a figure who had never been identified before. This person, dressed in an old-fashioned suit, was standing just outside the frame of the group, his face partially obscured by the shadows. No one had ever mentioned this person. Thomas had seen every family album, every snapshot, and yet this figure was a complete mystery. He wasn't even sure if the person had ever been in the family, and yet here they were, standing in the shadows of what appeared to be a normal, happy family event. Could this mysterious figure be connected to the messages they had all been receiving? Was it possible that this person was somehow tied to Margaret's death or the strange photograph that had haunted the Owens family? And why had no one mentioned him before? As Thomas studied the image, he felt an unsettling connection between this mysterious figure and the events unfolding now. It was as if this person, who had never been part of their lives, had somehow always been there, lurking in the background, pulling strings in ways no one could fully understand. But just as Thomas was about to dive deeper into this lead, the photo mysteriously disappeared. It was as though someone had intentionally erased it from existence, and Thomas was left standing there with nothing but the eerie feeling that he was being watched. Desperation began to set in. Everywhere they turned, something or someone was blocking their progress. The family, now scattered and distrustful, found it harder to communicate with each other, each member becoming more paranoid and uncertain. David, still reeling from the missing laptop and the strange messages, began to suspect that someone close to him might be orchestrating all of this. But who? Rachel, who had been acting strangely since the very beginning? Thomas, whose newfound involvement in the investigation seemed more like an attempt to prove his own worth to the family? Or was it someone even closer, someone who had been hiding secrets for much longer than anyone had realized? No one could be trusted. Everyone seemed to have something to hide. As the tension within the Owens family grew, another unexpected turn took place. David, who had been growing more obsessed with finding the truth, received an encrypted email that seemed to promise answers. It came from a name he didn't recognize, a name that hadn't come up in any of their earlier searches. The email contained a single attachment, an audio recording. Without hesitation, David clicked on it, his pulse racing. The recording was long, too long for him to fully process at first, but as he listened, his blood ran cold. It was a voice he knew all too well, Margaret's. But this wasn't a message of love or farewell. This was something far darker. The voice, distorted and muffled, was whispering something about a betrayal, about a secret that had been buried with her. The words were difficult to make out, but the tone was unmistakable. It was a message meant for the family, a warning that they were getting too close to the truth. Margaret, or at least the voice that sounded like her, was telling them to stop, to leave the past alone. But here's where things took an even more sinister turn. The voice in the recording mentioned something that no one had expected, a name. Evelyn. The name was unfamiliar to David, to Thomas, to Rachel. No one knew who Evelyn was, and yet here she was, mentioned in the same breath as the buried secrets of Margaret's past. Who was Evelyn? Why had her name never come up before? What role did she play in this entire mystery? And why, after all these years, was her name only now surfacing, just as the family was on the brink of discovering the truth? Now, with everything spiraling out of control, the Owens family was left with more questions than answers. The strange photograph, the mysterious messages, the cryptic recording, all of it pointed to something far deeper than they could have ever imagined. The stakes were higher than ever, and no one knew who could be trusted. The clock was ticking, and the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous things became. With Evelyn's name now in the mix, the question remained, was this the key to unlocking the mystery of Margaret's death, or was it yet another puzzle piece designed to send them further down a dark, winding path? The tension was unbearable. And as they inched closer to the truth, one thing became clear: someone, or something, was trying to stop them. And that someone wasn't finished yet as the days passed, the air in the Owens household grew thick with tension, and every passing moment seemed to add more weight to the growing sense of unease. They were no longer just investigating a strange photograph, they were caught in a web of shadowy threats, mysterious disappearances, and an insidious presence that seemed to be lurking just out of sight. The family's every move felt watched, their every conversation listened to, and the weight of it was beginning to crush them. David had tried to keep his focus, to push through the growing dread that gnawed at him, but the pieces of the puzzle were coming together in a way that made him question everything. Who had sent that email with Margaret's distorted voice? Why had it taken so long for Evelyn's name to surface, and why did it feel like someone, or something, was desperately trying to keep that name buried? The closer they got to understanding the truth about Margaret's death, the more desperate the forces against them became. And it was becoming clear that those forces weren't just trying to stop them from uncovering the truth, they were trying to destroy them. It all started on a quiet afternoon. Rachel had been more elusive than usual, staying in her room with the door locked, refusing to come out. Thomas was equally distant, the cryptic message he received still hanging over him like a dark cloud. But it wasn't until that evening, when David went to check on his brother, that he noticed something was horribly wrong. The house, which had always been filled with the sound of laughter and chatter, was now eerily silent. David knocked on Thomas's door, but there was no answer. He called his name, growing more anxious by the second, and then, without waiting any longer, he forced the door open. What he saw sent a chill running down his spine. Thomas's room was completely empty. It was as if he had just vanished. The bed was untouched, the windows closed, and nothing appeared to be out of place except that his brother was gone. There were no signs of a struggle, no clues as to where he had gone or why. It was as if he had simply disappeared into thin air. Panic set in almost immediately. David's mind raced. Had someone taken him? But who? And why? He thought about the text Thomas had received, the cryptic warning to stop digging. Was this the consequence of their investigation? Had Thomas, in his search for the truth, become the next target? The thought hit him like a punch to the gut. What if they were all being hunted? As the hours dragged on with no word from Thomas, David's mind began to spiral. The house felt like it was closing in on him. The walls, once familiar and comforting, now seemed to pulse with an ominous energy, as though the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. It was like being trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. The fear was palpable, a constant weight pressing down on his chest. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him, waiting for the moment to strike. Every time he moved, he felt as though he was being followed, his every step shadowed by an unseen presence. Even the smallest noise, a creak in the floorboards, the flutter of a curtain, sent his heart racing, and every corner of the house now seemed like a hiding place for someone who wanted to keep him from uncovering the truth. But it wasn't just his mind playing tricks on him. The next morning, after a sleepless night, David received an anonymous phone call. The voice on the other end was distorted, barely audible, but the message was crystal clear: "You're next." The phone clicked off before he could respond, leaving him with nothing but a racing heart and the sickening realization that whoever was behind this knew exactly what he was doing, and they were watching him. The words echoed in his mind, over and over again. "You're next." The same phrase that had been used to warn Thomas, now aimed directly at him. David felt his world shift beneath him. The paranoia, the fear, it was consuming him. He could feel it in every muscle, in every beat of his heart. Who was doing this to them? Who could be behind the threats, the disappearances, the shadowy figures that seemed to be closing in on him from every direction? The more he tried to rationalize it, the more it felt like something far darker was at play. This wasn't just a family mystery anymore. It was something far more dangerous, something that could destroy them all if they weren't careful. But even worse, David began to realize that there was no safe place to run, no place where he could hide from the growing sense of dread. The feeling of being followed intensified. He started noticing strange cars parked outside his house, their drivers always watching, their faces hidden behind tinted windows. Every time he left the house, there was someone there, always a step behind him. It was as if he had become a target, a pawn in a much larger, much darker game. The question wasn't just why, it was how they knew everything. How had they been able to track him, to manipulate the events in his life so seamlessly? It felt as though his every move had been anticipated, as though someone, somewhere, had been planning every step of this, orchestrating it with cold precision. In the middle of all this chaos, David had to confront the one thought that had been gnawing at him for days. Was it possible that someone in the family was responsible for this? Was there a traitor among them, someone who had been feeding information to whoever was behind these threats? He thought about Rachel, and the strange way she had been acting, her reluctance to engage with anyone, her reluctance to even talk about Margaret. Could she have been hiding something all along? Could she have been the one pulling the strings, leading them down a path that would ultimately destroy them all? But even as the fear and paranoia closed in around him, David knew one thing for certain: he couldn't stop. He couldn't let the truth remain buried. Not after everything that had happened, not after Thomas's disappearance, not after the message he'd received. He had to keep going. But as he stood in his living room, staring at the empty space where his brother had once been, a dark realization settled over him. It wasn't just the truth that was at stake anymore. It was his own life. David wasn't sure how much longer he could keep going, but one thing was clear: he was in far deeper than he had ever imagined. Whoever was behind all of this wasn't just trying to hide the truth, they were trying to destroy him. And now, with his family scattered, his brother missing, and his life on the line, David had no choice but to keep pushing forward, knowing that every step could be his last. As the weight of the situation settled on his shoulders, David couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Whoever was behind this, whoever had been orchestrating the events that had turned his life upside down, was drawing closer. And the closer they got, the more desperate the situation became. The truth was still out there, hidden somewhere in the depths of the Owens family's past, but the deeper David dug, the more dangerous it became. And with every passing moment, the walls seemed to close in just a little bit tighter. Stay tuned. Because what happens next will shake you to your core. The stakes have never been higher, and the mystery has only just begun to reveal its true horrors. David couldn't shake the feeling that the world around him was spinning out of control. The missing photo, the cryptic messages, the threats against his family, they had all pushed him into a spiral of paranoia and dread. But just as he thought he was finally starting to piece together the puzzle, something happened that shattered everything he thought he knew, something that would change the entire course of the investigation and make him question every decision he had ever made. It happened on a rainy afternoon, one of those days where the world outside felt just as dark and oppressive as the emotions that had been building up inside him. David had spent hours going through old family albums, desperately searching for any clue, any scrap of information that might explain the mysteries surrounding Margaret's death. He was desperate. He needed something, anything, that could help him understand why this was happening, and why his family was being torn apart by forces beyond their control. His hands trembled as he turned each page, each photograph offering nothing but more confusion, until he came across something that made his heart stop. It was an old letter, tucked between the pages of a photo album, one he had never seen before. It wasn't addressed to anyone in particular, but it was written in a familiar hand, his mother's. David's breath caught in his throat as he began to read the words that seemed so out of place, so far removed from everything he had ever been told about his family's past. The letter spoke of something he had never imagined, something that had been buried deep within their history, something that his mother had chosen to keep hidden. She wrote about a secret she had kept for years, a secret so terrible that it had caused her to distance herself from certain family members, to sever ties with people who had once been close. And then, in the last line, came the bombshell: "I never told you about Evelyn, because Evelyn is your sister." David's heart pounded in his chest as he reread the line, the words seeming to blur together in his mind. Evelyn, his sister? He had never heard that name before, never once in his life. The letter made it clear that his mother had been hiding the truth about Evelyn, keeping her existence a secret even from her own children. But why? What had happened to Evelyn? Why had his mother kept her hidden from everyone? And more importantly, what did this mean for the investigation? Was it possible that Evelyn had been the key to everything all along, the one person who could unlock the mysteries surrounding Margaret's death? David sat in stunned silence, the weight of the revelation crashing down on him. Everything he had believed, everything he had thought he knew about his family, was now in question. He felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking into an abyss that threatened to swallow him whole. The clues he had followed up until now seemed insignificant compared to this new information. Evelyn wasn't just some distant figure from the past, she was a part of the Owens family. And yet, no one had ever mentioned her. No one had ever talked about her. It was as if she had never existed at all. But why? What had happened to her? Where had she gone? And why had his mother kept her secret for so long? But just as David was beginning to process the enormity of what he had discovered, another shock hit him. Rachel, who had been acting increasingly distant and paranoid over the past few days, walked into the room, her eyes wide with panic. She was holding something in her hand, something that immediately caught David's attention. It was an envelope, the same kind of envelope that had been used to send the threatening letters. The same kind of envelope that had contained the mysterious photo of Margaret. His stomach sank. "David, you need to see this," Rachel said, her voice shaking. She handed him the envelope, and David's eyes widened as he saw the name written on the front. It was addressed to him. His breath caught in his throat. He had no idea who would have sent this, or how they had gotten his name, but he knew one thing for certain: this was bad. Rachel opened the envelope for him, and inside was a single sheet of paper, with a message that made his blood run cold. The message was simple, but the implications were enough to leave him reeling. It said, "Evelyn never left. She's been here all along." David stared at the paper in disbelief. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of it. Evelyn never left. What did that even mean? Had she been living among them for years without anyone knowing? Had his mother been hiding her in plain sight? The questions kept multiplying, each one more confusing than the last. David's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the truth. Someone had been hiding something much darker than he could have ever imagined. The room seemed to close in around him. His breath quickened, and his thoughts swirled in a chaotic mess. Was it possible that Evelyn had been living in the shadows, watching everything, waiting for the right moment to make her move? Had she been orchestrating the strange events that had been happening to the family? The more David thought about it, the more he realized that the person he had been searching for, the person who could explain Margaret's death, the person behind the mysterious messages and the vanishing photos, might have been standing right in front of him all along. But who was Evelyn? And why had she been hiding in the shadows? Before David could process everything, another bombshell dropped. The phone rang, and when David picked it up, his entire world was turned upside down once again. The voice on the other end was cold, deliberate, and unmistakably familiar. It was his mother. "David," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You have to stop. It's too late to turn back now. Everything you think you know, it's all a lie. Evelyn isn't who you think she is. And if you keep digging, you won't be able to stop what's coming." The line went dead. David stood frozen, the weight of his mother's words hanging in the air like a noose. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but they didn't fit together the way he had expected. Nothing made sense anymore. Evelyn wasn't just a missing piece of the family puzzle, she was the missing piece, the one thing that had connected all of the chaos, the lies, the secrets that had been buried for so long. And now, with his mother's warning echoing in his mind, David had to ask himself, what had they all been running from? The mystery that had seemed so straightforward just days ago had taken a darker turn, and the truth was more elusive than ever. What had started as a search for answers had now become a race against time, and David was no longer sure who to trust, who was behind the threats, or even if anyone in his family had been telling the truth all along. The walls were closing in, and the answers were slipping further and further out of reach. One thing was certain, though: the game had changed, and the stakes were higher than ever before. And just when he thought he couldn't take any more, something else changed the game entirely. A face appeared in the window. David's world had become a maze of lies, fear, and impossible choices, and as the pressure built, he could feel himself spiraling deeper into a darkness he wasn't sure he could escape. The discovery of Evelyn's existence had shifted everything, yet every step forward seemed to lead him further into a twisted web of uncertainty. The tension in the house was unbearable, and the walls seemed to be closing in with every passing minute. He had already lost so much: his brother was gone, his family was fractured, and the very foundation of his life was crumbling beneath him. But now, it wasn't just about finding the truth, it was about survival. The phone calls, the threats, the cryptic messages, they were no longer just warnings. They were direct attacks, an indication that whoever was behind this was done playing games. David had tried to convince himself that he could handle it, that he could keep digging and uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. But as the days stretched on, the toll it was taking on him became undeniable. Every time he thought he was getting closer to answers, another layer of the mystery was peeled back, and with each new revelation, the danger only seemed to grow. It was Rachel who forced David to confront the hard truth. Her face had been drawn, pale, haunted by something unspeakable. She had always been the quieter one, but now, she seemed almost unrecognizable. The tension between them had reached a breaking point, and it wasn't long before the cracks finally began to show. She found him late one night, hunched over his laptop, trying to make sense of the endless stream of emails, messages, and photos that had flooded their lives. David could barely look her in the eye, the weight of everything hanging between them like an insurmountable chasm. "David, this has to stop," she said, her voice low but trembling, barely above a whisper. "You need to let it go. You need to walk away." The words hit him like a slap to the face. He'd expected her to say anything, but this was a direct warning, and it didn't make any sense. Rachel had been as involved as anyone in the search for answers, but now, it was as if she was begging him to quit. "What are you talking about?" he asked, the words coming out harsher than he intended. "We can't just give up now. We're so close. Don't you see that?" But Rachel wasn't looking at him the way she usually did. There was something colder, more distant in her eyes, something that didn't match the vulnerability he had grown so used to. She stepped closer, her movements tense, like she was walking a fine line between pleading and threatening. "No, you don't understand," she said. "You think you're getting closer to the truth, but you're not. You're just digging a deeper hole, one that you can't get out of." David's heart raced. "What do you mean?" "Rachel, this isn't just about me, it's about all of us. It's about finding out who did this to Margaret, who's been controlling everything behind the scenes." He felt the urgency in his chest tighten, his breath quickening as the pieces of the puzzle refused to fall into place. "This is bigger than us now. We have to keep going." Rachel's eyes darkened, and for a moment, David saw something in them that he hadn't before. Something dangerous, something secret. "David, you need to listen to me," she said, her voice now barely audible, as if the weight of her words could crush them both. "If you keep digging, if you keep searching for answers, you'll never get out of this alive." His mind reeled. "What the hell are you talking about?" The question left his lips before he could stop it, and he could feel his pulse pounding in his ears. Rachel took a step back, her face now shadowed by guilt and fear. "There's nothing left to find. There's no truth to uncover. You're already too deep. You think you're the one in control, but you're not. You've been played this whole time." David froze, his blood running cold. "What are you saying? Are you saying you know something? Rachel, what aren't you telling me?" His voice rose, desperate, but his gut told him that this was bigger than he could have ever imagined. She closed her eyes, like she was steeling herself for something. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry, David. I never wanted you to get hurt. But it's too late now. They'll come for you, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. You can't outrun them. It's too dangerous." David's head was spinning. His own sister, the person he trusted most in this twisted mess, had just given up, had just admitted that she knew more than she had been letting on. "You've been hiding something from me, haven't you?" The accusation felt like a physical blow, and it sent a shudder through the room. Rachel was silent for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice cracked with emotion. "I never wanted this for us. But you have to understand, I didn't have a choice. None of us did. You're too close now. If you keep going, if you keep pushing, it'll destroy everything." David felt his chest tighten, his mind racing. What was she talking about? What could possibly be so dangerous that Rachel, the one person he thought he could trust, would be willing to betray him? His pulse quickened as he realized the terrible weight of her words. She wasn't just warning him, she was trying to protect him. But from what? Or who? And why now? The silence between them stretched, thick with unspoken truths, until Rachel spoke again, barely above a whisper. They're watching us, David. Always. And they'll stop at nothing to keep you from finding out the truth. The family secret, it's not just about Margaret. It's about all of us. And the truth will tear everything apart. David stood frozen, the enormity of her confession settling in like a weight on his chest. There was no easy way out now. His choices had never been so clear or so impossible. He could walk away, stop searching for answers, and maybe, just maybe, protect his family from whatever was lurking in the shadows. Or he could continue down this dangerous path, digging deeper into the mystery, knowing that the truth, when it came, would come at a terrible cost. The stakes had never been higher, and the pressure was suffocating. Every decision felt like a life-or-death gamble. And then, just as the last shred of his hope seemed to slip through his fingers, another text arrived on his phone. The message was simple, but the implications were horrifying. You've made your choice. David's blood ran cold as he realized that the game had only just begun. The real danger was only now becoming clear, and no matter what he decided, there was no turning back. David's heart raced, a cold sweat beading on his forehead as the implications of Rachel's words churned in his mind. The walls were closing in around him, and every direction seemed to lead to more danger, more lies. He stood there in stunned silence, processing what he had just learned, but it didn't take long for the reality to hit him. Rachel had just told him that their family's darkest secret, Margaret's death, the hidden truth about Evelyn, the cryptic messages, was part of something much bigger than they had ever imagined. He wasn't just fighting for answers anymore, he was fighting for his life. As he stood there, the phone in his hand buzzing violently, a text from an unknown number lit up the screen. He swiped it open without thinking, his pulse pounding. The message was short but carried the weight of everything he had feared. It's time to end this, David. You've seen too much. The words felt like a death sentence, each letter a final nail in the coffin. His instincts screamed at him to run, but he knew it was already too late. Rachel's warning echoed in his ears, but it wasn't just her voice he heard anymore. David's mind raced as he realized the scale of what was unfolding. Evelyn was only the tip of the iceberg. He had always assumed the conspiracy was contained within his family, just a few dangerous secrets buried under years of pain and deceit. But now, it felt like the very foundation of everything he thought he knew was crumbling beneath him. Someone had been pulling the strings all along, and David was just a pawn in a game far larger than he could comprehend. He turned to Rachel, his eyes wide with fear and disbelief. Who else is involved in this? Who else knows the truth? His voice trembled, the desperation clear. She stepped back, her face a mask of regret, and then, with a heavy sigh, she answered, I didn't want you to find out this way, David. But now it's too late for secrets. She paused, her breath shaky as she tried to steady herself. The conspiracy isn't just about Margaret, and it's not just about us. There are people we know, who have been involved in this for years. People you trust. David's stomach twisted, his mind racing. The weight of her words hit him hard. What do you mean? Who? He demanded, his voice rising. His pulse quickened, the anger and confusion bubbling up inside him, threatening to overwhelm him. Rachel took a deep breath, trying to hold it together, but the tension in the room was palpable, each second dragging out the revelation like a slow torture. Your mother, she wasn't just protecting us from Evelyn. She was trying to protect you from them. From everyone else who's been pulling the strings. Your mother's involvement, it goes deeper than you think. She knew Margaret's death wasn't an accident. She knew that there were people inside our family who had been involved in things they shouldn't have been. But she was too scared to do anything about it. Too afraid to expose them. I think she was even part of it. David recoiled, the words hitting him like a physical blow. His mother, part of the conspiracy? The woman who had raised him, who had always been there for him, how could that be possible? The confusion, the fear, the anger, it all collided inside him like a storm. No. This can't be true. My mother would never. Rachel's eyes welled up with tears, and her voice cracked as she continued, You don't know her like I do, David. You don't know what she's been hiding. She's always been the one to keep the truth buried, to make sure everything stayed quiet, no matter the cost. And now, the people who've been involved, people who've been watching us, are closing in. They know we're getting too close. David felt his breath catch in his throat. He turned, pacing frantically, his thoughts a whirlwind of disbelief. He had trusted his family, trusted his mother above all else, but now it was clear that everything was built on lies, secrets, and a conspiracy that reached farther than he could have ever imagined. He thought he was looking for the truth, but now he realized the truth had been staring him in the face the whole time, he just hadn't been able to see it. And the worst part? He was still too close to the fire. His phone buzzed again, and his hands shook as he picked it up. A voice on the other end sent a chill through him, cold, deliberate, and strangely familiar. "You've made your choice, David," the voice said, the words like ice. "You've seen too much. Now you'll be part of the problem. There's no going back from here." The line went dead, leaving David in stunned silence. His stomach dropped, and for the first time, he felt the weight of his choices. This wasn't just about a missing person or a hidden family secret anymore. This was a full-fledged conspiracy, one that involved more people than he could count. People who had been pulling the strings for years, keeping everything under control. People who wouldn't hesitate to silence anyone who threatened to expose them. And then, just as the truth of what he had uncovered began to settle in, David's phone rang again. This time, it was his mother's number. His hands were trembling as he answered. "David, I need you to listen to me carefully." His mother's voice was strained, hurried, almost frantic. "You're in danger. I never wanted any of this to happen. I never wanted you to get involved. But now it's too late. They're going to come for you, and you can't stop them. The only way to survive this is to let go of everything. Let go of the investigation. Let go of the truth. Please, for your own safety, do it. Trust me. It's the only way." The words hit him like a slap. His mother was pleading with him, begging him to stop, to walk away, to let it all go. And yet, every fiber of his being told him to keep going, to push forward, to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The door slammed open behind him, and David whipped around to find Rachel standing there, panic in her eyes. "You need to leave. Now. They're coming for us." It was all happening too fast. The world around him felt like it was spinning out of control, and David knew he had reached a tipping point. The people behind this, his own family, his closest friends, were not who he thought they were. They had all been playing a part in something far darker, far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. And now, the stakes were higher than ever. The truth was slipping through his fingers, and time was running out. Rachel grabbed him by the arm, dragging him toward the door. "There's no time. They're already here." David's mind raced, his heart pounding. His family was falling apart, and the web of lies was strangling him, tighter with every passing second. Who could he trust? Who was working against him? He didn't know, but one thing was clear: he had no choice but to keep running. Keep fighting for the truth. Because if he stopped now, he might never get out alive. David's heart thudded in his chest as he sprinted through the darkened streets, Rachel gripping his arm in a desperate attempt to keep up. The tension was unbearable, like a thick fog closing in around him, pressing down on his every breath. His phone buzzed again, but he couldn't bring himself to answer. There was no time for distractions. They were no longer just chasing answers. They were running from something far more dangerous, something that had been lying in wait for years. He didn't know how much longer they could keep running, or even if it was possible to escape whatever was coming for them. But one thing was certain: the endgame was upon him, and he could feel it in his bones. The sounds of footsteps behind them echoed through the narrow alley, relentless, a constant reminder that they weren't alone. Someone was tracking them, closing in fast. David risked a glance over his shoulder but saw nothing in the darkness. Still, the feeling of being hunted gnawed at him. They had no idea who was pulling the strings, but they knew one thing for sure: this wasn't just about family secrets anymore. This was something much bigger, something that had been carefully orchestrated for years. Rachel gasped beside him, nearly tripping as she tried to keep pace. "David, we need to stop. We can't keep running. If we don't face this now." "No," David cut her off, his voice sharp, filled with the desperation of someone who knew they had reached the point of no return. "We can't stop. Not now. We're so close." But even as he said it, doubt began to creep in. The stakes were higher than they had ever been. The threats had escalated beyond simple intimidation. They had been followed, watched, and warned to stop. Yet, David couldn't shake the feeling that all of this, the hidden messages, the cryptic photos, the betrayal, was leading them toward one final confrontation. And if they didn't face it now, it would consume them both. The sound of a car's engine roared in the distance, drawing nearer. David's breath quickened as he realized they were about to be trapped. He glanced around wildly, looking for some kind of escape, but the alleyway was too narrow, the shadows too thick. There was nowhere to run. "David." Rachel's voice was frantic now, and when he looked at her, her face was pale. Her eyes wide with terror. "There's no way out. We have to face them. We have to know the truth." David paused, taking a long, ragged breath as he tried to steady himself. He could feel the weight of everything pressing down on him. The lies, the secrets, the loss, everything had been building to this. They were at the precipice of something monumental, and all he wanted now was to survive. He turned to Rachel, his eyes filled with determination. "We're not running anymore. We're going to finish this." Without another word, David started moving, his steps purposeful, despite the knot of fear in his stomach. The end was near, and there was no going back. The car pulled up in front of them, its headlights blinding. The doors swung open, and two figures stepped out. One of them, to David's horror, was his mother. Her face was grim, her eyes shadowed with guilt and fear. The other figure was someone he hadn't expected, someone who had been in the shadows all along. It was his uncle, Adam. David's breath caught in his throat. Adam, the man he had trusted, the man who had always been there for him. His heart sank as he realized the full extent of the betrayal. His uncle had been the mastermind all along. The one who had orchestrated everything. The one who had used their family as pawns in a much larger game. "You've made a mess of things, David." Adam's voice was calm, controlled, as though he were discussing a simple business transaction, not the destruction of everything David thought he knew. "I told you to stop, but you wouldn't listen." David's blood ran cold. You're the one behind this. All of it. Margaret's death, the messages, the photos, it was you? Adam smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only cold, calculating satisfaction. "You should have known better, David. This isn't just about you, or your family. It's bigger than that. Much bigger." He took a step forward, his eyes glinting with an eerie intensity. "I had to make sure you understood. I had to make sure you saw the truth. But now, I think it's time we finish what we started." David's heart was racing. He was trapped. The walls were closing in, and the truth he had spent so long trying to uncover was now being thrown in his face like a cruel joke. But there was no time for doubt, no time for hesitation. This was it. The moment he had been running from. "Why?" Rachel's voice trembled as she stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Adam, the man who had once been like a second father to her. "Why would you do this? To us? To our family?" Adam's smile faltered for a moment, and for the briefest second, something like regret flashed in his eyes. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a cold, unyielding determination. "Your family was never just a family. It was always a means to an end. A way to gain power, to secure our future. You've been too blind to see it." David's stomach churned, the words cutting deeper than any knife. "You've been using us. All of us. You killed Margaret. You manipulated our lives for your own gain." His voice cracked, the weight of the betrayal sinking in. "You used me, Rachel, you used all of us." For a moment, it felt like the world was spinning out of control, like David was standing at the center of an abyss that threatened to swallow him whole. But then, something inside him snapped. He couldn't let this stand. He couldn't let Adam destroy everything he had left. He had come too far, sacrificed too much to give up now. Without thinking, David lunged forward, grabbing Adam by the collar and slamming him against the side of the car. "You won't get away with this," he spat, his voice full of fury. "This ends now." For a moment, Adam seemed surprised by the outburst, But then he laughed, a cold, humorless laugh that echoed in the alley. You think you can stop this, David? You think you have any control over what happens next? But just as David's grip tightened, something unexpected happened. A sharp crack echoed in the air, and David felt a searing pain explode in his side. He staggered back, his vision blurring as he gasped for breath, his hand instinctively going to his wound. Rachel screamed, rushing to his side, but David barely heard her. His mind was spinning. He looked up, only to find his mother standing there, a gun in her trembling hands. "Mom, no!" David's voice was hoarse, his words thick with disbelief. He had never imagined it would come to this. His own mother had betrayed him, had betrayed everything they had ever fought for. "I'm sorry, David," she whispered, her voice cracking as she lowered the gun. "But I had no choice." The world around him seemed to collapse in that moment, and as David's knees buckled beneath him, the last thing he saw was the cold, calculating look on Adam's face. The game was over. The truth had been revealed. But it came at a cost that David wasn't sure he could survive. And just as the darkness took over, David realized the final twist: he had never truly been in control. The conspiracy wasn't just about the family, it was about him. He had been the pawn all along. David's eyes fluttered open, the sting of his wound still sharp, but there was a strange numbness beginning to settle in. The world around him felt hazy, as if he were floating somewhere between reality and the unknown. He wasn't sure how much time had passed, but when he looked around, he realized he wasn't in the alley anymore. The cold concrete had been replaced with the sterile white walls of a hospital room, the beeping of a heart monitor the only sound filling the silence. For a moment, it felt surreal, as if everything that had happened, his family's betrayal, the conspiracy, the gunshot, had been some twisted nightmare. But the pain in his side, the dull throb in his chest, reminded him that this was very real. He was alive, barely, but alive nonetheless. Rachel was sitting beside him, her face pale, eyes swollen from crying. When she saw him stir, she breathed a sigh of relief, her lips curling into a faint, bittersweet smile. "You're awake. I thought I lost you," she whispered, her voice cracked, filled with both relief and sorrow. She reached for his hand, her touch gentle, as though afraid that if she held on too tightly, he might slip away again. "I'm so sorry, David. I never should have kept you in the dark. I never should have let you get this far into it." David's throat tightened, but he couldn't bring himself to say anything. The weight of the truth had already crushed him. His mother's betrayal, his uncle's manipulation, the tangled web of lies and deceit, it all felt like too much to bear. He had spent so long trying to uncover the truth, but now that he had it, it felt more like a curse than a revelation. He had been used, controlled, and in the end, it didn't matter. The damage was done. The people he loved most, the ones he thought he could trust above all else, had turned on him. "You didn't know, Rachel," he finally rasped, his voice barely audible. "You didn't know what they were capable of. You weren't part of this." He tried to reassure her, but deep down, he knew it didn't change anything. The darkness that had consumed his family wasn't something that could just be washed away with apologies. It was too late for that. "I should have seen it," Rachel said, her voice shaky. "I should have known something wasn't right. But I was too scared. I let my own fear blind me, and now it's too late." David squeezed her hand, feeling the weight of the past few weeks press down on him with the intensity of a storm. "It's not too late. We're still here. We can still figure this out." But even as he said the words, he wasn't sure if they were meant for her, or for himself. He had been so consumed by the need for answers, the thirst for justice, that he hadn't stopped to consider the cost. The toll it had taken on him, on his family, on everyone who had been pulled into this mess. He wanted to believe there was still a way forward, that there was still hope, but deep down, a part of him was beginning to wonder if there would ever be a true resolution. The door to the room opened, and a nurse entered, her expression neutral but professional. "Mr. Harrison, you're awake. How are you feeling?" David nodded slowly, his gaze flickering to Rachel. She gave him a reassuring smile, but there was something different in her eyes now, something that spoke of loss, of change, of a world that could never go back to the way it was before. "We'll need to run a few more tests," the nurse continued, but David didn't hear her anymore. His thoughts were elsewhere, his mind still reeling from everything that had happened. The past few weeks had felt like a whirlwind, everything unraveling faster than he could process. His family, his life, his trust in the people closest to him, it had all been torn apart, and now, there was only the aftermath to face. The nurse left, closing the door behind her, and for a long moment, the silence between David and Rachel felt suffocating. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The unspoken truth hung heavy in the air, like a shroud that neither of them could escape. David's mind wandered back to the last moments he had shared with his mother. Her words, her warning, still echoed in his ears. "It's too late, David," she had said. "You've seen too much. They'll come for you now. There's no going back." It was a truth he couldn't ignore, no matter how much he wanted to. His mother had been right about one thing: there was no going back. The pieces had been set in motion long before he had ever stumbled upon the first clue, and now, there was only the path ahead. But what path was that? What future could there possibly be when everything he had known, everything he had trusted, had been a lie? Could he truly move on from this? Could he find peace knowing that his family was torn apart by betrayal, that the conspiracy was much deeper than anyone had ever imagined? As the days passed and David's condition improved, the answers he had been chasing seemed to slip further out of reach. He had found the truth, but it wasn't the truth he had wanted. It wasn't the closure he had hoped for. It wasn't a neat, satisfying ending. And yet, even as the pieces fell into place, there was one final question that lingered, unanswered and unresolved. What was the real reason behind the conspiracy? What had his mother been protecting him from? Who were the people behind it all, and how deep did the corruption run? David didn't have answers. Not yet, anyway. But he wasn't done. Not yet. He had been to the edge and back, and though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: he couldn't let this be the end. There were more truths to uncover, more lies to expose. The story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Rachel, sensing his thoughts, gave his hand one last squeeze. "We'll figure it out," she whispered, her voice steady, despite everything. "Together." David didn't reply. He didn't need to. But as he looked into her eyes, he knew she was right. There was no going back, but there was still a future to fight for. A future that wasn't defined by betrayal and lies, but by the possibility of rebuilding, of finding something worth living for, even after everything had been shattered. As the screen faded to black, one final image lingered in David's mind, the cryptic message from the first memory: "You've seen too much." And for a moment, he wasn't sure if that was a warning, or a promise. The screen went dark, and the audience was left in silence, their minds racing, questions lingering, the mystery unresolved. David's journey was far from over, and the final twist hung in the air like an unanswered question, leaving everyone to wonder what came next. Would the truth ever truly be uncovered? And if it was, what would it cost to finally find peace?